these guys are warring factions. This is our history. I pretty much accept this, Gerald. I mean, I see the Sumerian count from many authors, and I love your stuff, Gerald, because you have a wide spectrum to look at this from an engineering science perspective. But you know, are these guys still here? That's the bit. If they were there in the past, well, why aren't they still here today? Are they here? Are they, you know, is this battle for the resources ever still going on, Gerald?
Well, that's a very good question. So let me give you kind of a little background information. While they were here doing their mining operation and they're controlling their bond heaven Earth so they could stay in touch with Nibiru, that fell under it actually fell under Nin Hartzog's authority. She got given the Sinai Peninsula as her region, even though the Enlil looked like he assumed it was his and treated it as such.
Warring factions, this Sumerian history we're talking about, you know, these guys are battling over Earth's resources in ancient times. Are they still here? You know,
oh, okay. Right.
Who's good, who's bad, who's going to win?
Right, okay. So I wanted to start with a little tidbit that I brought before and I lost track of that question because of that. There was a point in time where an emissary was sent from Nibiru to the higher-ranking Anunnaki council members to give them a message, and this was circa, I believe it was circa 500 BCE time frame.
Okay.
And about that time, and his name was Galzu, and he was a classmate with Nin Hartzog back on Nibiru. And he also was the one that indicated to her that she was experiencing more advanced aging than he was, and because they were peers in classroom, and she had aged much more than he had. And he pointed that out on a visit. Well, on his next message to them, it was very urgent that they get this message from Anu to them. And the message was and he only specified a certain number of people, and it looked like it was the early lead party from the Anunnaki that came to the Earth and had been here too long. Apparently, gravity had affected their bodies in a way that they had not perceived. And because of the adaptation their bodies had made to the gravity field, if they went back to Nibiru, they couldn't operate normally, and it was purported that they would die. So really bad news. Enlil did not take it well. So what am I telling you is that by about 500 BCE, a whole bunch of them left. They were given the choice to stay on the Earth and not be enslaved to the gravity field, or they could go back to Nibiru. Okay. So who was here that was on the advanced team? Enki and Enlil and Nin Hartzog and Nanarsin and Enlil's son Allah, who shows up in the Ultra-Hasis count, Ninurta, Ningshita, and a couple others. And all their offspring that were the offspring of the Greek demigods, right, and the Egyptian demigods, those were all their offspring, and a lot of them ended up staying too. So now that we know that they had to stay because of their enslavement to the gravity field.
It's a tough call, isn't it, Gerald? I mean,
yeah, imagine.
Yeah, you're on Earth as an outpost, and you're like, well, you might have to stay forever now.
Well, that actually, you know, it was interesting because the ones that had noble characters said, well, you know, we started this mission and we're going to see it through, and these are our creation, and we're here with them. And that was Enki and Nin Hartzog and Ningshita types. Of course, he was ordered by Anu to be mankind's teacher. Don't forget that. Very, very important, his role. That was Mercury, Thoth, Hermes, okay, the same being, the one who wrote the Emerald Tablets. Mm-hmm. So from an exopolitical standpoint, assuming these warring factions are still here, which they are, have the wars stopped in the last zodiacal age?
Nope.
Nope. They're still going on. And it's pretty clear right now what they valued. They valued fuel for their vessels, materials for their beautiful temples, and apparently gold for a couple of purposes. Yeah, to put it into a powder form and spread it like talcum powder in their atmosphere to shield radiation. That seemed to be a losing battle, though. I mean, imagine every time it goes around the sun, you got to redo this.
So that was like a quick fix. This monatomic gold was like a quick fix system, Gerald.
Well, they were actually debating respawning volcanoes on their planet, having all the sulfur gases and stuff, and to spew up and recreate an artificial layer for them using nuclear weapons in their account. This was about 450,000 years ago. That's what spawned them to leave to come to the Earth in the first place, or to get something that they got ionized in their atmosphere that would act as a proper shield. Now, are there other places in the solar system to get gold? Probably. But for some reason, the Earth had at least enough that was over their threshold that we decided it was worthwhile to come here and get it. And you can clearly see from the gold mines in South Africa establishing gold as the currency for our world economy and all the other reasons and all the shenanigans that went on with earlier religions and conquests over getting gold. It was, so there was a reason for that, and there were forces behind the governments and the queens and the explorers to go and do that, and it was the Anunnaki. So let's talk about this aging problem. Apparently, some of the solutions they came up with were hormonal. For instance, there are hormones that come from horse urine, and there are hormones that come from various places that we use today. Well, apparently, from the female Anunnaki Babylonian birth goddesses is what they called them, from their menstrual flow, certain hormones were created that actually activated the pineal gland. And so these ancient rituals of Hieros, Gatnos, and some of the others involved that knowledge, where they were using the chalice and the flower, the flower, think about that monthly flowing. But as they progressed, it seems like their knowledge advanced in metallurgy, and they figured out how to achieve the same thing with a monoatomic element. And this is a really interesting story out of Hathor's Temple, which is on Mount Sinai, and we've discovered it, and it's been explored. This is where Lawrence Gardner disclosed the fact that they had found lots of monoatomic gold underneath a stone in the floor.
Awesome research, Lawrence.
Yeah, he was really terrific, really great genealogist too. So anyway, so this is where we discovered the idea of the Anunnaki ingesting monoatomic bread cakes made out of this strange powder. And why were they doing that? Well, we now know they were using it to turn their energy body into a superconductor, and we know that's what monoatomics do now. They were using it to enhance their consciousness, and most importantly of all, including activating DMT in their pineal gland. The most important thing of all to them was Nin Hartzog, being the medical officer, needed a solution for this rapid aging on this planet that was going around the sun too fast relative to their old perspective. 1 year for them is 3,600 years to us. So it's a big deal. So in general, the concept of aging at different rates based on the proximity you are away from your sun, that's an interesting thing to think about, because it probably has to do with your exposure to radiation, if you think about
Gerald,
it.
do you think if these guys are living so long on Nibiru, that's why they're so clever? I mean, you think about... Purportedly their IQ is around 1,200, and depending on how pure their breed is, they don't live forever, but apparently the ones who are not doing something to keep their telomeres from decaying live about 800 years, and after about 600 years, according to some of the writings, they start becoming what's called a gaborum. They start becoming a giant. And apparently on our gravity field here, whenever that happens for them, they get a disparity between their internal organ growth and their skeletal growth, and that's what actually ends up killing them after about 800 years. Wow.
That's what's been told to me. So it seems to make sense, because if you go back to the story about Nimrod in the Bible, who many people believe was Gilgamesh, he began becoming a gaborum, which was a giant, after a certain period of time. And I think that's partly what also sent him off on his little quest to find Utnapishtim, who was Atrahasis, who was Noah. So
Can I take a slight track there, Gerald? Do you think that the American military went into Iraq to get Gilgamesh's body? Did you read about that?
Yeah, in 1991, I thought that was really interesting. Saddam Hussein was dealing with the United States military, about to go rout him out of Kuwait, but at the same time, he was running a huge engineering project to empty where the Tigris and Euphrates were emptying down into the reeded area that used to dump into the Persian Gulf, and he was trying to get all that water out there around the city of Uruk, because that was where Gilgamesh was king, circa 2900 BC. Yeah, huge engineering project he's doing. So while he's doing that, once he got it dry, he brought in a team of Germans with a magnetometer so he could find, map out the city, and it turned out to be over 5 kilometers in size.
Wow.
So they found the walls that Gilgamesh described and all the stuff he described in his epic, including where he said his grave was going to be. So that was reported by the BBC in a press release in 2003, that they had found Gilgamesh's grave. And that's about the last we heard of it. Well, if they found his grave, knowing his mother was Ninsun, his father was Lugalbanda, and he was on the Sumerian king's list, very important.
Genetic material.
Genetic material. Tell me about, because he would have been 2/3 pure Anunnaki. Now, if they'd have found his mother's grave, if she was around, Ninsun, she was full-blown Anunnaki. So that's all we need is one who's partial, one that's full-blown, and then the enslavement sample of a chimera of us and the Neanderthal, and you got the whole story absolutely proven. And that's been kept from us, and you know it has.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So going forward from all this mess in the Atrahasis, the Numa Elish, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, we get this name list that ends up as the Anunnaki Council, many of them. And let's start extrapolating that forward. If we're to assume we know what their symbols are, and we're to assume that they, against their will, had to stay here, otherwise, they would have died. Now, would they have been able to progressively, maybe like coming from a deep-sea diver, decompress as they went to experience gravity in between Nibiru's orbit and the Earth? Possibly. Maybe they could go to close planets like Venus and Mars without, suffering too much. I don't know. I think it would be more of a geometry issue relative to gravity than it would distance from the sun. But anyway, that's just my understanding. So I think it has a lot to do with the radiation exposure. So assuming they're still here, I just told you that I believe Enlil, Nanar Sin, who was Allah, and Enki and Ningshita are still here. Now, if that's the case, the gods from Greece, they translated directly. The Greek pantheon of 12 was the Anunnaki Council of 12. Straight transfer. So Zeus, the head of the council, was Enlil. Poseidon, his arch-rival brother, half-brother, was Enki. And that story did not change from Sumeria to Greece. Mm-hmm. And all the rest of them, too. Ningshita in Sumeria became Thoth in Egypt, because that was his dad's domain, so he had reason to be down in Egypt. And then he became Quetzalcoatl in Latin America, and then he became Hermes, or actually, right before he became Quetzalcoatl, he was Hermes to the Greeks, and then he became Mercury to the Romans. Okay, so he gets around. So, assuming they're still here, that they had major battles. Read the War of Gods and Men from Sitchin to see the extent of how much these guys brutalize each other. And plus, the Mahabharata and several ancient documents describe these winged gods firing missiles at each other, and some of them have the power to burn the flesh off an elephant while it was still standing. So they were nuking each other.
Yeah, nukes. Yeah. These guys were a pretty noisy bunch, Gerald. They were vicious to each other.
Yeah, they absolutely were. And it's interesting. I find it interesting. Before Islam overtook Iran as the state's religion, you realize they were of the Zoroastrian religion. Yeah.
Zoroastrian, yeah.
Yeah. So this was BC, about 1000 BCE. The Zoroastrian religion was still in play, and I think it was around 535. I got to go look at my notes when the Muslim army came in and finally overtook, and then of course Islam became the religion in Iran. Well, before that, the region had summarized these Anunnaki gods on the Council of 12 into the two most powerful ones, and it was Ahura Mazda, who shows up on the Persepolis Temple, the Cliffs of Behistun, and many other places where Enki's in his winged disc flying around. It's pretty obvious. Right, and you see that in Sumeria too, the same symbol. Well, his arch rival, and he was known as the wise creator, the god of light and wisdom. Whereas his arch rival, they had believed that it was the great destroyer, the great deceiver, and he was called Ahriman or Angra Mainyu, and that was Enlil, and that was an accurate description of the two most powerful beings around the Anunnaki Council, relative to mankind's fate and destiny, and they were not kidding. It was a predecessor religion for Christianity, Islam, and several others. So it all started with Enlil and Enki. Right. So that's really important to know. So now we know that Enki represents light and Enlil represents dark, and they may switch roles every other zodiacal house or so. We don't know for sure. But this is the role that they're playing. At least it's been consistent from the Atrahasis all the way forward through the Bible. Look at the Old Testament, where Genesis 1:26, where they said, "Let us in our image create mankind." Well, that was the council decision of the Anunnaki in Africa, while the Ajiji miners were surrounding Enlil's house, and they made that decision. So now all of a sudden you connect those two and go, "Oh, well, now that makes sense." So.
Sorry, Gerald. The bit that gets me is that the Anunnaki Council of 12 let this Enki Enlil battle go on, that they were tolerant of it or accepting of it.
Well, the only person that was higher ranking than them Enlil's wife would have been an outranked Enki, and then Anu and his wife. Those are the only ones above him. So, and Anu and his wife are back on Nibiru. So when they're out on this foray on a planet and another planet on the solar system, their laws apparently were open to interpretation, according to
free reign. They had a free reign.
They acted like it was the Wild West, and they were unconstrained. And whatever forces they could bring to bear, they did. So.
In a way, battlefields today, is every military that goes into battle perfectly complying to all rules of combat? No, there's military that break the rules, like so.
Well, absolutely. So, and actually, if you read about the Gigi in the Lost Book of Enoch, when some of them were named for violating Enlil's orders to keep the primitive workers stupid and dumbed down so they could be good slaves. Well, they were teaching them metallurgy and a whole bunch of other. Occult knowledge, hidden knowledge that they weren't supposed to know, and it just infuriated Enlil. So, his MO all along was elevation of consciousness. What? Keep those slaves at work all the time, and that's all they need to know. Period, is what I tell them. So, he was a brutal taskmaster, and you could tell by the way he ruled them. So now keep that in mind as he became Jehovah and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as he left the city of Ur and Nippur, which was mission control headquarters, and moved up to the Levantine when the water got too high and started destroying the pre-diluvial Anunnaki cities. So that's how he ended up at mission control in Jerusalem. Okay, so carry forward the attributes of Enlil and the genocidal things he did to the one that's running all three world's religions. If you're venerating Abram, who was Enlil's general, then he's got you, because he started all three of them. So keep that in mind. So now we've talked about who's light, who's dark, which is which, and who wins. Well, if you were to assess the last zodiacal house age in the culling effect of man's inhumanity to man, I would let you guess who's winning. Is it light or dark?
At the moment, it seems to be dark, but I have faith that light will win, Gerald.
Well, you and I both do, or we probably wouldn't be doing this, because
otherwise
it seems pretty feudalistic. I mean, now, what I noticed when I was studying the zodiacal houses, and there seemed to be a pattern, is that the Enkyites and Enlilites somehow came up with an agreement that they would alternate roles at the Lord of the Command rank of 50 on the Anunnaki Council. So you get an Enlilite, meaning you got Ninurta or Nanarsin or Isker Adad or one of his kids, and they'd have to be an offspring of him and his half-sister to be in line to rule. Or you got Enki and his offspring, and there were several of them, okay? He had 10 kids himself on Atlantis that he made kings, Enki did. So anyway, so all of a sudden you see this ping-ponging effect back and forth. So if you could find one place in the zodiacal house where you knew who was in charge, then from that point forward, each zodiacal house, you could kind of, does it seem to be following the positive, negative that you see in the zodiacal wheel? It seems to. So Pisces was a negative polarity cycle. That means an Enlilite was in charge. That makes sense to me? So it's kind of a simple theory, but I started checking it out. It seems to work. So at the end of Pisces, when you enter Aquarius, it's pretty clear to me you're going to see another Anunnaki Council change. So about every 2,160 years to expect that. And we're seeing that exactly.
Sure. Yeah, Gerald, for me, well, this is questions for everybody. This is for the audience to voice this general question. But I mean, how do we cope with the 1,000 years of deceptive history? For me, I always seek the truth, Gerald. I know I have to sift through a lot of BS, and I have to sift through a lot of manipulation and sift through a lot of deception or misdirection or disinformation to get to where I have to go. But eventually, I always believe that the truth will percolate to the top if you seek it long enough. And I think that's my coping behavior. But is that what we got to do? Is that we've got to raise the awareness? Is that how we cope with this thousands of years of deception?
Well, if you remember Rene Descartes, he was this philosopher. He decided he was going to cast off everything he believed and then start over and listen. And anything he gleaned or learned, he wanted to do it of his own accord without taking on the authority of someone else. That's a great mind experiment, but it's probably not reality, because when you're young and vulnerable, how could you be of the consciousness to do that? So you're already too far gone. So what I tried to do is you can look at people generically and say, well, people have beliefs, and they generally use them to establish a mental framework for dealing with the range of issues that get thrown at them in this life. And the penultimate one is they're trying to establish beliefs that lead to meaning. They want to know that they're here for a reason. Why are they here? What's their purpose? And that's why these questions about the Sumerian origin are so important, because when you find out exactly what Anu told Ningshita, Thoth, our teacher, what he told him what to do to teach us, and what our lot was in this life, it makes a lot more sense. And all of a sudden, everybody's on the same page, and there isn't this warring. Okay. So how do you cope? Well, what I generally try to do is, like you, seek the truth. Of course, I've got my belief systems, but when I find that they get confronted, I generally try to view the belief as a stopping place in a Socratic dialogue. It's the best information I have at the time, given somebody was supposedly telling me the truth. Well, when you find out everything that you have is a lie, at this point, the only way out of this spell, this trap in your head, is to trust your feelings. You've got to go back to the gut primitive intelligence that you have as part of your reptilian system, that you can tell the difference between truth and false, and it's based on how you feel. It's not in your head, so you're going to have to read and look at this stuff yourself, and when it resonates true with you, and you ignore it, then you're doing it at your own peril. But if you pay attention with the feeling of truth, it will lead you to the right place. So, is that a coping mechanism? No. Is it uncomfortable to cast off everything and wrestle with it? It takes years, actually, for me to untangle some of the beliefs that I still had that were based on all these lies. But
were you shocked in a way, Gerald, when you kind of had this discovery process? I'm sure there was a mainstream academia that you followed. I did too. I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was very screwed. Listen, I had a BS filter pretty thick, and I took years before I even talked to anybody about the theory, and I also spent a lot of time taking the data and corroborating it and doing my homework. So when you see the genealogy table that we've just completed, I'm about to make it public. You'll see the amount of time I spent putting the names together and connecting the dots, and it was it was kind of a fun hobby for me, to be honest with you. Here I was. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have to tell you, do me a favor, Gerald. Mention your website for the listeners, because otherwise I'll just keep talking. So people can follow along.
Yeah. Okay. So my website is geraldclark77.com, and on there, GeraldClark 77.com, and on there there are links to my Facebook page. It's Gerald-Clark, and my YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff. So follow the links and check it out. And my book and my wife's book, Meatless Mainstays for Modern Man, is available on Amazon. And my book is The Anunnaki of Nibiru. So if you just search for my name in Amazon, it comes right up. Anyway, so as far as that goes, this deceptive history, I think it's, if you come forward in time now, realizing that multiple governments have disclosed what they know about alien presence on this planet, including Canada and Mexico and several others, it's about time that we face the fact that we're not alone in this universe, and that there are other beings that are out there kind of watching us in quarantine to determine whether we're even capable of cooperating on a scale where we could be galactic partners. And I'm telling you, if I was looking in from the outside right now, imagine right now, as far as I'm concerned, in between the zodiacal houses, when they change, and by the way, the next zodiacal cycle, based on who Enki was paired up with half-sisters and lineage that were in the right place to rule, it is my professional opinion, from all I've done, and I've said this multiple times, that the next person who's in line to rule was mankind's teacher, and that was Ningshita. Okay, so he also was known as, in the Levantine, as Jehoshua, and so he was the one who did the Trojan horse trick in the Levantine to give mankind access to higher consciousness so that Enlil could stop suppressing them as primitive worker slaves. So he was always planned. He was always our teacher and our ticket the way out. So understanding that also helps you understand what the caduceus really means as a transformative symbol relative to energy and matter. So did we do enough on the deceptive history and whose roles were played? Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are we at today? I mean, we have vicious programs. You got Big Pharma, Monsanto. I want to talk about some modern stuff too, Gerald, and tie it in because we are being manipulated as a race. We are facing imminent threat as, I mean, just the general public, from all sorts of things, everything from fluoride to, you know, genetics to, you know, are we going to be wiped out by our own, you know, our own cousins like?
Well, you know, and you've probably heard me say this on a couple other shows. Based on the timing in between the zodiac, whenever there's a house change, there's usually a little grace period for the powers that be that were in charge to, I don't know, get their culling to, you know, it's like a vote, and they take time to tally up who belongs to who, and they get to see which one is pursuing light and which one's pursuing dark. It's a really odd kind of judgment that seems to happen, especially when it seems to happen, not every zodiacal house, but it seems to happen, or potentially it does, but it seems to especially happen, or there's a special event that happens when the precession of the equinox goes around a full cycle. So it just so happens we're at that point in time now. So all of a sudden we're approaching a new age of Aquarius, and also we've according to Mayans in 2012 or 2013, depending who you listen to, at winter solstice, we just made a full cycle around the precession of the equinox. Mm-hmm. So that was a 26,000 great year cycle. Well, every time that happens, according to the writings that I've read, there's usually an opportunity for a great ascendancy and a great culling at the same time. And I truly believe that's what's happening right now. And I really think, you know, everybody watched the Mayan calendar come and go and didn't really, you know, get anything out of it. Well, nothing really happened, you know, it was a false alarm. Well, I don't think so at all. And it has to do with our exposure to energy and the awakening of our consciousness. So those that are paying attention to that and ready to graduate from the Earth simulator get an opportunity at that point. So as far as these roles that FDA, Big Pharma, and Monsanto are playing, listen, all aspects of the government, especially in the United States, given who landed there and who's in control, there's a negative culling going on, and it's being pushed to the max. So everything you eat, everything you breathe, everything you touch, you're going to be faced with a choice, and some of it's not even free will. This is where I get disturbed, such that you choose wrong and you're going down. You'll end up with cancer. You'll end up with a tumor from some electromagnetic frequency you didn't know about. Who knows? Sure. You know, so there's and so now you've got the proof that the FDA is being puppeteered by Big Pharma. And Monsanto's in bed with the government in terms of paying whether a farmer grows this crop or that, and in order to regulate the food supply, so they had a way in to contaminate everything. It's really quite awful. I mean, the genetic modification, it sounds like a good thing, but if you do a study and it shows that it's destroying the consumers of that product, you should stop. But the problem with the seed is once you've sown it, it's hard to stop it.
You know, 10 years ago, Gerald, I started, don't ask me why, I just got conscious of reading the labels and looking for just basic products where it was just basic foods, none of these E numbers. I think I was probably looking for E numbers. And then I started looking into things, you know, I research where my fruits come from, what countries are the countries coming from for the fruits, and what pesticides they have in those countries, and I try to limit the damage of the food going into my body. Inevitably, you know, there'll be fluoride in the pesticides, there'll be fluoride getting in somehow. I can only limit the crap that goes into my body, even no matter how healthy I am. Particularly I'm looking forward to doing a show with your wife Krista.
Yeah, I wanted to put a plug in. Last night actually we stayed up a little late, and she just put out a video on her YouTube channel. And I'll get it to you. That we did exactly that. I finally pinned her down. I wanted to find out, you know, what kind of stuff she could disclose about her vegan path and what she's found out about Monsanto and the effects of different diets and so forth. And she did a really great job. So we put it out yesterday. And it's really, you know, it's bang up with pictures and everything. So it's really fun. So
I'll put that in the YouTube description for this show.
Yeah, well, I'll get you connected to that.
Listening live, they'll be able to check it out on
YouTube. Well, she may want to go ahead and do another show with you to get a different audience over there. So I'll definitely connect you with that.
Okay. I would love that, because this ties in nicely. And you know, there is a culling going on. We know that they have it on the Georgia Guidestones. They want the population down to 500 million. They'll probably keep going, but
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So now let's make that real for a second. Let's go back to the Atrahasis. Knowing that Enlil is symbol of the eagle, was introducing disease, doing this, cutting off the food, the water. He's willing to wipe you out, people. No questions asked. All you got to do is sign up to his agenda, and he'll willingly wipe you out. That's the crazy part about this whole simulator that we're in. So if he was doing it in Africa and Mesopotamia before, and he's still here, and his symbols showing up at governments all over the world, guess what? It's negative culling time, and it's not a joke. It's not a joke. So these big players that show up, these three-letter agencies typically that are controlled by the government. I mean, come on. Look what's going on with our DHS, for instance. Not only just what's going in your body, but our sovereignty, our way of life. Everything is the carpet's being pulled out from under people. So, yeah.
I mean, I think that one of the things I tried to do was buy food without MSG in it, Gerald, and it's nigh impossible now. You know, and I cook all my sauces from scratch now, Gerald. I just learned to do it.
We do a lot of that as well. I think you'd have a great show with Krista. So all the different things that are being done to affect your health. Well, listen, your body is your temple, and if your temple is screwed up, either structurally or musculoskeletally or genetically, listen, you're going to have a much harder time getting your human antenna to work so you can plug into the frequencies that light you up and wake you up. And that's part of the ascendancy. You know, I'm not sure if we're going to talk much about energy matter. I did a bunch of it in my book.
The energy matter you did talk about in your book. Let's just jump in there for a second.
Okay.
I love the chakra systems as nodes of wavelengths. This is the electrical engineering, Gerald, covered out. I actually love this. It was beautifully described.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, you know, actually...
Talk a bit about that.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. We stepped on each other.
Yeah, you had the equation for the energy in the human body. I won't give it. It's in the book, but it's the way you broke it down, and it just makes so much sense that each frequency is a frequency of light. That's why we have these chakra colors and chakra nodal points.
That's exactly right, because all you got to do is know that the speed of light equals the wavelength times the frequency, and the wavelength is the color. And so if you take the speed of light divided by the frequency, you get the color. So the interesting part to me is that the chakra system introduced to us from India and ancient cultures knew that. They knew the different colors of the chakra. And even more amazing is they knew that it was the color of the rainbow, which is really, imagine Enki designing us, and he decided to make these wavelengths at these ganglion nerve nodes along your central conductor coincide with the division of visible light.
I did a master's in Research Sciences Society. I was actually going to go and do something else, a PhD in physics, and I never did. I just took a master's in research, and I chose to do Babylonian Sumerian cylinder seals, and I was studying them from an engineering perspective and a cultural perspective. But I soon realized, Gerald, that these guys were using all these different colored crystals. They have, maybe they were picking the energy off the crystals. I don't know, but it's like they carved these cylinder seals, Gerald. Now, these cylinder seals are reverse embossed, so that when you roll them into clay, there's a raised bump surface. I'm sure you know this.
Right. I saw a little special on one of those recently, and they could not figure out how they had done this image in reverse at such granular detail.
Yeah, I mean, you need a microscope. Sometimes you can't even see the image till it's rolled in the clay, you know. And it's what they carved them. It's like sometimes they use soft tone, like a calcite, granites and diorites and crystals and rock crystals. Sometimes they're multicolored chalcedonies that you can't even see the image. It's the worst substance to carve into, Gerald. Yet they have this technology to do it. And not only that, I think they chose the subject, these crystals, for their energy, or, you know. And of course they wore them around the neck as well, like pendants. So I somehow that they chose the material for its energy, or its.
Well, there's an amazing story in some of the work I was reading, some of it from Sitchin, where Marduk had been holed up inside the Giza pyramid, where he was put into exile for asserting his rulership 24 years too early. He became the he got the rank of 50 about 2000 BCE and took it away from Enlil. Well, in part of getting there, he had a lot of problems. But one of the accounts, Ninurta actually went into the pyramid, the Giza pyramid, and took out several crystals that they were using for. I think they were using them for. Yeah, they were using crystals apparently for communication and also for sound healing effects inside the pyramid. So that was really interesting. But there was an account where Ninurta went out and took them out and seemed to affect their bond heaven-earth communications. So that was interesting, and the idea that they did use crystals a lot, and they knew a lot about energy and matter that we don't know.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So let's see. So at that point, we start to get the idea that these people that are building these amazing temples, I mean, like the 52-degree angle on some of the ziggurat temples in Mesopotamia match the ones that were in the Yucatan, which had Thoth's signature all over it. That was his number, 52, right? Mm. So anyway, so all of a sudden you start looking around currently, exopolitically in the world, go, well, if they're still here and if they're marionetting us to cull the population, do this, produce their technology, build their underground cities, everything else that we've done, what's the role of these secret societies, and yeah. how are the Illuminati and the Masons playing their role in this new world order? Okay, so
I'm glad you brought that up. I just come back from Austria, as you know, Gerald, with Klaus Donna, and I mean, that place is Illuminati central. There's Masonic stuff everywhere there, you know.
Yeah.
It's in your face. There's pentagons and, you know, the causeways, everything in the city. The Skull and Bones societies there. Everything is built into the churches from like it's frightening. It's absolutely
right. Well, I want to lay something out before we get started. Imagine that the greatest deception of all is taking your creator and making him out to be some evil destroyer. Okay, Enlil made sure that happened through the Catholic Church all the way through time. From the time that the Catholic Church became a reality under Constantine till now, that infrastructure has been in place to shut people up and to maintain control. Okay, so secret societies were formed way back in Babylon under the Royal Dragon Courts, under Marduk and others, to keep secrets. You have to realize the Enlilites and the Enkiites were absolutely at war, and here they were in Babylon in the Mesopotamian region in Enlil's territory when all those wars took place. So the old secret societies had a place to carry knowledge whenever somebody was trying to rout you. Okay, so it turned out that the Illuminati showed up, I guess in 1776 in Europe, and of course it was in Bavaria, and this was a time when the Catholic Church was still killing people for talking about the Earth not being at the center of the solar system, and so on and so forth. I give you Isaac Newton, for instance. Okay, so the Masons also, though, all go all the way back to Babylon, as far as I'm concerned, and they have a lineage that progresses forward through the Knights Templar and so on and so forth. But so you have to ask yourself, why did the Illuminati in Europe all of a sudden infiltrate the Masons, and the church was absolutely opposed to people being part of the Masonic order? Well, so this was their way of trying to destroy the Masons. Well, the original Masonic charter appears to have been something that I would generally call influenced by Enki. Okay, the ability to use scientific knowledge to cut stone, stack it up really nice, and do it in such a way where you're using sacred geometry as well. I mean, this was all incorporated into their knowledge, even in the castles in Europe. Mm-hmm. So what role are they playing? Well, it's hard to tell, because once they started infiltrating each other, it was hard to know which was which. But now what I see is the symbols showing up on their structure has me very confused, because it looks like the Illuminati under the Catholic Church, and who's worshiping Lucifer, right? They've got a Lucifer scope. They've been doing their homilies at Easter in the last 2 years in Latin, saying exactly that they venerate Lucifer. And so when you find out that the Illuminati is venerating Lucifer, they're doing it. They're part of the same gig. Okay, and this is an Enlilite gig. Very, very destructive. So, as far as the Vatican's role, well, it should be pretty clear through their Jesuit order in setting up the Federal Reserve and controlling all the world's banks. They are the source of banking, in essence, and so so they're playing the financier role, but they're also playing a religious role relative to fulfilling Enlil's wishes through his prophets, and this is where Bible prophecy comes in, involving the prophets Ezekiel and Daniel, and also in the teachings of Malachi when he was talking about the last pope, and he counted them off. And this shows up in several of the books. We're at the last pope right now, so that's very interesting. So in my opinion, right now, the Vatican's playing the role of fostering a place to harbor an ancient astronaut who's a genocidal murderer who's going to declare himself God on the Temple Mount, just like he wrote to his prophets that he was going to do. Now listen, if they live as long as they do, what's a zodiacal house to make a little prediction like that 2,000 years? It's nothing. These guys, minimally, the first kings in the Sumerian kings list were serving 28,800 years on their term. That's not how long they live. That's how long they serve. And now, how's that possible? I want to kind of jump back to something real quick before we talk about the Illuminati and the Masons anymore. In 2009, 3 scientists were awarded a Nobel Prize for their research into telomeres. And this genetic research, and just real quickly, I'll just summarize it. If you can find the precursor to the chemical telomerase in your body, and it's in significant quantities, then your telomeres at the end of your DNA don't decay. They don't shorten. Your cell replication doesn't cause decay, which is where you come up with aging. Okay, that's what causes aging. So they discovered okay, so back to the Starfire Gold. The Anunnaki knew this. They were taking Starfire Gold to prevent their aging. That's on the guidance of Nin Hartzog. Okay, so I wanted to put that to rest, and then come back to. Now, let's come back to the current time with the New World Order thing. So on the dollar bill, you see this unfinished pyramid and the all-seeing eye. And I want you to keep in mind that these symbols that are being implemented to bring about a New World Order coincident with the change in our zodiacal house, by the way. That's no coincidence. So this world order, you know, if you look at it, you go, well, if it was brought about by Enki and his clan for the benefit of mankind, giving us all the technology to get rid of fossil fuels, no more healthcare problems, fix our genetics, wow, we would be living a utopian existence, right? Whereas if you let the other side do it, you're probably going to be living in a brave new world, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so just because they were Anunnaki from another planet, the religious right will tell you, oh, they're all fallen angels and they're all demons. Well, apparently their personalities range just as far as ours do on this planet, everything from serial killers to saints. So if you're disparaging the one who genetically augmented and created you, I guess that's within your right. But I don't know. They venerated the creator of all, but at the same time, would you venerate somebody who was in a genetics lab today that created a chimera that had sentient consciousness? Would you?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't know. I mean, there's probably
a question of perspective, Gerald.
It is. You know, if they just created you and turned you on your own and you weren't capable of surviving and you just died instantly, yeah, you'd be kind of looked at as a crappy creator. But if you actually took care of your creation and tried to protect it and allow it to evolve to the point where you were, and did it, you know, in a fair fight, then I guess I'd be okay with that. I guess I don't know. It's part of the question of whether the gate with which they gave us to ascend is wide enough.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So
what a fascinating discussion, Gerald.
Isn't it fascinating?
This is enlightening because you brought some new knowledge that I wasn't quite aware of, and that's why I love doing the shows, Gerald. I love doing this because, you know, I'm knowledgeable in a lot of the material. I like getting into a new book and doing this and coming up with new knowledge. And I like the way you present the knowledge, Gerald. It's a scientific and it's a very wide spectrum that you have. You know, and there's very few people that would rise to that challenge too. You need to be enthusiastic too, Gerald, as well as having the skill set.
That or just a little disturbed. I designed electronic circuit boards and field programmable gate arrays and application-specific integrated circuits and that kind of stuff. So what am I doing messing around with the Anunnaki and the origins of mankind? I mean, well, you have to ask yourself. I don't know. It was in my path to do this, and I think I was significantly influenced by Anu's appointed teacher to do that. So that's the role I'm playing for now. And I don't know what role I'll be playing next. But speaking of role playing, did you see the movie The Hunger Games?
I haven't. No.
Oh, okay.
I read a book every other day, and I haven't watched.
This one I'd encourage you. And also, there was another movie called The 13th Floor, and then there was another one called The Truman Show. And they're all kind of different takes on virtual reality or a 3D environment that might be simulated, okay? And the experiments that they did.
Mm-hmm.
So after reading Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe, I actually started considering some of this information to be more valid. In particular, when I did the energy body equation from a human, you realize we're electrical beings, and in the electromagnetic spectrum that we're in, there's a whole full range that we're experiencing, and only a small part about which we can perceive. 4 to 700 nanometers for our eyes, 0 to 20 kilohertz for your ears, and 0 to 20 hertz, or about a half hertz to 20 hertz for your brain waves. Okay, and then whatever's going on in your chakras, you know, the wavelengths and the frequency of each of those. So you're having an interaction with these electromagnetic spectrum and gravity too. So that being said, knowing that we were talking about crystals and structures, and that the majority of a material item is actually free space, and you have a structure based on how the protons and neutrons, electrons, and all the other particles do fits together. Well, most of it's free space and electrons. It's energy. Everything is energy, and Einstein's equation shows that. So that being said, imagine an ancient alien had the ability to create a simulator, much like on the Star Trek holodeck, in a holographic space where, you know, the 5 senses that you have, you've learned what it means to touch something and say that's hard or that's solid or that's soft. Well, if everybody has that same experience, you've just set a simulation parameter that establishes a common norm. How are you going to know any different if it isn't a simulation, is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same manipulation. You are being manipulated. How do the manipulated know they're manipulated if you're 100% successful?
Well, that's where the movies are interesting, and they all had the same theme. If the archetypic character who's walking their heroic journey overcomes their dark night of their soul, their fear, whatever it is, they find a way out of the simulator. On the 13th floor, they did a simulation. They were doing the simulation, and inside, so they were a simulation. They found out they were also inside of a simulation by finding a disturbance in the network that had been set up to establish the hologram. There was a place where it wasn't complete, and somebody told them about it. They went and saw it, and that's when their whole brains went crazy, and they realized they were in a simulation. So, you know, it came up in Avatar and several other, in the Matrix, where the idea of being able to have your energy be at someplace other than in your body. I think after reading Robert Monroe's books, Journeys Out of the Body, and experiencing that myself for years, I think that's a reality. So I think we're in a material simulator where spiritual beings have this crazy material experience, and it's all designed to evolve our consciousness. So we're ready for the next encounter with our galactic neighbors when we get out of quarantine. I really think that's what's going on. And the culling that's going on right now is absolute. Listen, you're not kidding about the Georgia Guidestones. They have no qualms whatsoever about taking this material form and eliminating it and coalescing the energy into something that's going to be more beneficial to them. Because energy's never destroyed; it's only changed its state.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to throw this one in, Gerald, off topic, back to Nibiru. Do you think the 1983 Iris satellite picked it up? Do you think that was a definite picking up Nibiru on the radar?
Well, I did a video on my website. I posted it where Zecharia Sitchin went to Washington, D.C., and he sat down after having sent him his book, The 12th Planet, in 1976 when he wrote it. He sent it to him later. This was 83, like you said. He sat in his office in Washington, D.C., and went back and forth. And I have it on video of Harrington telling him, here's my chart, here's yours, is it? And he said, I absolutely agree with you that it was. So there's no question in my mind that the chief of the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. Had the IRAS data. He commissioned it because he did it based on Zecharia Sitchin's knowledge, and also the fact that they were seeing perturbations at Pluto and Neptune, and they couldn't understand what was large enough that was causing that.
Yeah, the perturbations would have to be like a failed second sun of a red dwarf or something like that at that distance.
Yeah, you know, there's other things that I've read all those accounts, but I'm also reconciling the fact that there are up to 20 alien species on this planet, according to Paul Hellyer from Canada. So there's been a lot of interaction going on. They probably fight among each other for vying over the Earth's resources. I don't think that's changed. So it becomes hard to know about who's who and where they landed. But that's probably what's going to show up in my next book. I'm writing another book called The Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising. That's the title.
Wow, beautiful. Look forward to that, Gerald. Gerald, do you do astrology at all? Off topic. Do you look into astrology at all?
Well, I went through this phase where I did, and I got this book. I'm going to reach over and grab it right now. It's by a guy named Kevin Burke, Understanding the Birth Chart and a Comprehensive Guide to Classical Interpretation. It's pretty well written, and I actually went out and got the software and played with it for a while. And as the bottom line for me with astrology was, if you think about it in terms of a planet's effect on the resultant electromagnetic spectrum that occurs on your planet, this is where it makes sense to me. So if you put the moon in between the sun and the earth, you're going to get a different amount of radiation striking our ionosphere than you would if you hadn't. So all of a sudden now you start going, wow, these planets have energy interactions with them. And if you think about the true definition of what gravity is, which has not been disclosed, gravity has to do with an expansion force, and it's based on the geometry of the planet. And it also perfectly is described in a book called The Final Theory by McCutcheon. I think you'd really enjoy that if you like physics, by the way. The Final Theory by McCutcheon. His very first chapter is all completely on gravity, and when he's walking you through some of the stuff that was taught to you in physics, especially mechanics when you started out, and as you move forward with him, you're going to realize you were either deceived intentionally or we just truly didn't know. I think it was probably the former. So that being said, it's an interesting thing to recognize the extent to which we could be in this simulator. So again, I want you to go back and see Hunger Games to see the effect of the constructs that would come about with a new world order that we're going to see right now, especially if an Enelite is bringing it about. Now, just to finish that thought before I get way too off base, the new world order you're seeing right now under the Enelites, it's being imposed with Apollo at the helm of and Enlil, the father and son, Zeus and Apollo. Okay, they're the ones that are implementing that part. Contrary to that was what we had in Atlantis under Enki, and so Washington, D.C. was supposed to be a place where the new Atlantis rose, not a new world order of a tyrannical beatdown. So once again, the negative forces are smearing the positive forces, trying to create a false structure. When the new one does come, that's what gives me hope. I think the carpet will be pulled out from under all this crap that's going on right now. You know, subjugating borders and all the things that are happening. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's going to be headed by Enki and his son Ningshita. So that would be Poseidon and Hermes. So it's really funny to me. I never gave any credence at all to the Greek god thing and never studied Greek mythology much. So I came at it from Sumeria and had to follow it through to the point where Western culture starts teaching about it. It's really funny. But, you know, it's still taught to us as a myth today. Now, let me ask. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to do some justice. Are you speaking at anywhere, a conference anywhere, or do you do conferences? Do you want to give a plug out for anything you're doing this year?
Well, I actually do conferences. That I've done a couple of private ones. I was supposed to be a contact in the desert this year, and I had another one scheduled in June in San Diego. For some reason right now, I think my path is such that I can reach more people over the internet than I can in person. As much as I want to confer and do that, there may be a time this year that I allocate some time to do that, and maybe we'll do it together. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but right now.
Over this
right now.
Over this part of the world.
Yeah, well, right now, just so you know where I'm at, I've just taken my book and converted it and had it proofed in Spanish, so it's going to be coming out. There's so many people in the world that speak Spanish that want that, and I'm also targeting to get it out in Russian too right now because I think that's very important.
Wow, have you got a Russian translator?
Not yet.
Wow.
I actually was approached by a publisher that was going to do the translation, but I actually like to do things locally and then farm out responsibilities later. So,
yeah, Gerald, I'm going to wrap it up with that because I could go on for another hour or two, and we're at the end of the show. What a fascinating guy you are. I love your research, I really do, and keep going. I look forward to
I look forward to your enthusiastic approach again on the next book. Like, and I just love it. I love the spectrum that you have, Gerald. You know, and there's few out there to have that spectrum and the enthusiasm. So,
well, James,
again, sorry, just give us out your website and you can wrap it up yourself, Gerald.
Okay, it's GeraldClark77.com, and I want to say to you, James, thanks for being so patient with some of the networking problems we've had to get this pulled off. Your enthusiasm made me want to stick it out and get through all the issues. So I look forward to seeing your posting, and I'll do one as well. And I hope we'll have a chance to do another interview. Mining operation, and they're controlling their bond heaven earth so they could stay in touch with Nibiru. That fell under. It actually fell under Nin Hartzog's authority. She got given the Sinai Peninsula as her region, even though the Enlil looked like he assumed it was his and treated it as such.
Warring factions, this Sumerian history we're talking about, you know, these guys are battling over Earth's resources in ancient times. Are they still here? You know,
oh, okay. Right.
Who's good, who's bad, who's going to win?
Right, okay. So I wanted to start with a little tidbit that I brought before I lost track of that question because there was a point in time where an emissary was sent from Nibiru to the higher-ranking Anunnaki council members to give them a message, and this was I believe it was circa 500 BCE time frame.
Okay.
And about that time, and his name was Galzu, and he was a classmate with Nin Hartzog back on Nibiru. And he also was the one that indicated to her that she was experiencing more advanced aging than he was, and because they were peers in classroom, and she had aged much more than he had. And he pointed that out on the Greek demigods, right, and the Egyptian demigods. Those were all their offspring, and a lot of them ended up staying too. So now that we know that they had to stay because of their enslavement to the gravity field.
It's a tough call, isn't it, Gerald? I mean,
yeah, imagine.
Yeah, you're on Earth as an outpost, and you're like, well, you might have to stay forever now.
Well, that actually, you know, it was interesting because the ones that had noble characters said, well, you know, we started this mission and we're going to see it through, and these are our creation, and we're here with them. And that was Enki and Nin Hartzog and Ningshita types. Of course, he was ordered by Anu to be mankind's teacher. Don't forget that. Very, very important, his role. That was Mercury, Thoth, Hermes, okay, the same being, the one who wrote the Emerald Tablets. Mm-hmm. So from an exopolitical standpoint, assuming these warring factions are still here, which they are, have the wars stopped in the last zodiacal age? Nope. Nope. They're still going on. And it's pretty clear right now what they valued. Well, on his next message to them, it was very urgent that they get this message from Anu to them, and the message was and he only specified a certain number of people, and it looked like it was the early lead party from the Anunnaki that came to the Earth and had been here too long. Apparently, gravity had affected their bodies in a way that they had not perceived, and because of the adaptation their bodies had made to the gravity field, if they went back to Nibiru, they couldn't operate normally, and it was purported that they would die. So really bad news. Enlil did not take it well. So what am I telling you is that by about 500 BCE, a whole bunch of them left. They were given the choice to stay on the Earth and not be enslaved to the gravity field, or they could go back to Nibiru. Okay. So who was here that was on the advanced team? Enki and Enlil and Nin Hartzog and Nanarsin and Enlil's son Allah, who shows up in the Ultra Hasis count, Ninurta, Ningshita, and a couple others. And all their offspring that were the offspring of the Greek.
These guys are warring factions. This is our history. I pretty much accept this, Gerald. I mean, I see the Sumerian count from many authors, and I love your stuff, Gerald, because you have a wide spectrum to look at this from an engineering science perspective. But, you know, are these guys still here? That's the bit. If they were there in the past, well, why aren't they still here today? Are they here? Are they, you know, is this battle for the resources, where it's still going on, Gerald?
Well, that's a very good question. So let me give you kind of a little background information. While they were here doing their fuel for their vessels, materials for their beautiful temples, and apparently gold for a couple of purposes. Yeah, to put it into a powder form and spread it like talcum powder in their atmosphere to shield radiation. That seemed to be a losing battle, though. I mean, imagine every time it goes around the sun, you got to redo this.
So that was like a quick fix. This monatomic gold was like a quick fix system, Gerald.
Yeah, I don't. Well, they were actually debating respawning volcanoes on their planet, having all the sulfur gases and stuff, and to spew up and recreate an artificial layer for them using nuclear weapons in their account. This was about 450,000 years ago. That's what spawned them to leave to come to the Earth in the first place, or to get something that they got ionized in their atmosphere that would act as a proper shield. Now, are there other places in the solar system to get gold? Probably. But for some reason, the Earth had at least enough that was over their threshold that we decided it was worthwhile to come here and get it. And you can clearly see from the gold mines in South Africa